give it up for the mayor again. How y'all doing out there? How y'all doing out there? How y'all doing out there? Well, y'all getting there slowly. Well, it's great to be back in Evanston. And very special place, very special place. I get really actually teared up a little bit when I think about what Evanston means. And I'm going to take a page from Jumoke's libation, because there was a brother named Kwame Ture who said we had to be ready for the revolution. We got to be ready for the revolution. And there are times when you ask the question, when I was driving in, why Evanston? Why Evanston? See, because I'm also a person of faith. So I'm wondering, why Evanston? Because they say in Scripture, it is, Evanston was for such a time as this. Because it happened to have Lionel Jean-Baptiste up in here. Now, I'm serious. It takes special people like Mayor Biss to be up in here. It takes special people who came from all parts of the country to be located in this liberal bastion and all of its contradictions, to have someone rise up and say, where there is no vision, the people perish. And to see that something was going wrong here. And to raise a voice to say, we will not allow that which is transpiring in terms of this liberal bastion, and yet our communities are being redlined. They have been redlined, the displacement of black people and black culture. I don't know necessarily how to do it, but I know we must do it. And so for such a time as this, there was a Robin Ruth Simmons right here in Evanston, Illinois, for such a time as this. And I cannot state this enough, really, because we, as Martin Luther King said, we will face some difficult days ahead. It's all right, because we ain't no ways tired. We know that we serve a Lord who ain't brought us here to leave us now. That's my favorite stuff. That's what keeps me going, right? But it's very important, because in Evanston, Illinois, this place, we have gathered here because, as Jesse Jackson would say, we needed hope. Keep hope alive. And what Evanston did was to give not only the city, but to give the world hope that reparations could in fact happen. Cannot take that for granted. I have to say that over and over again. So much so that people have come from all across the world. Every year somebody has come from the Kamm Reparations Commission. The first year it was Guyana. The next year it's Jamaica. Now all the way from, y'all kind of let that slide by you. We have somebody here from Georgetown, Grenada. Arley Gill, the chairman of the commission, from all the way up in here. Inspired, but also to go back and bring what is happening here in Grenada. And so you have to see yourselves, all of us, as special people for such a time as this. See, back in the day, Kamm, we used to have a saying, and Lionel would understand this. We say you have defense and development. You develop and you must defend what you develop. So when we do a town hall meeting, it ain't just accidental. We cannot take it for granted. We have to continually educate, organize the people right here in Evanston so that they too will understand how special they are. I mean, do you see that resource center? Did y'all go see that resource center, how beautiful and how wonderful that is? That's in Evanston, Illinois. And so that's why there's something special here that we also have to guard. I close on this note. Because in this moment, we also have to face the reality of people of faith, but they're different people of faith. I mean, there's some white nationalists, evangelicals, some white nationalists, white supremacists who say they are of faith. But I reflect back to another time in history. 1792 in a place called Haiti, in a woods they called Wakaima. And there was a voodoo priest whose name was Boukman. All right? And it was interesting because Boukman said, in effect, and I paraphrase, I don't understand the white man's God. I'm talking about these evangelicals now. See, they parade, they masquerade. They have come with a radical, right-wing, retrograde agenda dressed up in Christianity and religion. And Boukman said, I don't understand that. I don't understand the white man's God. He said, our God is a righteous God. Our God is a just God. And our God will deliver us. And it was that sense of faith. See, all the weapons were important. Yes, the military genius was important. But I believe more than anything else, it was the faith that instilled sense of power that we have. That I don't care about your guns. I don't care about Napoleon, your cannon. You have not faced anything like what we bring to the table. And we came all the way up, yes, out of the bowels of Africa. We are those who help give the world its civilization. We are not about to turn back. And they defeated the greatest army of that time, Napoleon Bonaparte, and sent him back packing to France. So the point here is to say that it is ironic that we are the rejected stones. Native people, we're on their land, rejected folk. Africans in America, the rejected stones. But at the end of the day, history records that it will be the rejected stones who were the cornerstones of a new America. That more perfect union is not possible without reparations. And as Professor Hilary Beckel has said, the world itself, he said it will be the human rights issue of the 21st century. And so applaud ourselves. Stand tall, stand strong. Because the rejected stones will be the cornerstones of a new America and a new world.
The state of the local reparations movement. We are thriving. We are more informed and united than ever. We are focused on solutions only, and we are making reparations common sense and commonplace. We are achieving reparations hyper-locally, one initiative at a time. We have a lifetime ahead of us in this work, but a repaired and just society where Black people are liberated, safe, respected, valued, and empowered is in sight as long as we continue working together. In this room, we represent 69 unique reparations initiatives from 35 cities, and 6 county initiatives for reparations are present as well. In addition to the United States, we have Grenada and Canada that are also present among us. Each of us working towards tangible redress for the impact of the institution of slavery and/or its legacies. From A to Z, we have the African American Community Service Agency here from Santa Clara County, to Walk for Reparations from Baltimore, Maryland. Our movement has led the passing of an additional 32 government actions for repair, including our most recent victories, yes to that, since last year. Since last year, an additional 32 government actions, including recent victories in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and by executive order, the cities of Chicago, Illinois, and the sweet victory we all have been fighting for, that our queen sister, Councilwoman Vanessa Hall Harper, I don't think she's down here right now, along with the mighty people of Tulsa, Oklahoma, have persuaded and convinced the city council to pass by a mayoral executive order to establish a reparations task force, whom has shown so much commitment that the entire commission has been made available to come here at the expense of the city. Is that accurate? The city paid for this. If the people of Tulsa could stand up, we've been fighting for you. We have been fighting with you. If there is not a case for local reparations, it is Tulsa, Oklahoma is the case. And we are so proud to have been with you really since the commemoration activity. And it's a shame that it took that. But since then, we have been locked arms with you. We have come to Tulsa multiple times. We have had many, many sessions, tears, laughter, and we have become family, and we are so thrilled that the city is committed. A diverse community of leaders elected is committed to advance reparations in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's a win for us all. So we want to make sure that you send your appreciation to Mayor Bynum and your encouragement to Mayor Nichols, the new black mayor of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Our diverse and intergenerational movement is changing hearts and minds, and therefore changing policy and systems. On Friday, we will hear directly from the local leaders of the 69 initiatives that are represented here in our regional report. So I'll save that reporting for Friday. I will highlight a few, and then we'll hear in more detail on Friday. Fayetteville, Arkansas, which I mentioned, taking an important first legislative step towards reparations. Baltimore, Maryland, establishing a reparations task force. Kansas City, Missouri, increasing its funding and its commitment to reparations. All the leaders are here in this room. The state of New York, their advocates are here, establishing and seating a reparations commission. The state of Illinois, expanding its reparations commission. Commissioners are here in this room. The state of California, leaders here today, passing various redress proposals and funding that work. More work to come. And Evanston, Illinois. Evanston, Illinois, continuing to disperse reparations. And you all have seen the headlines. Yes, we have been attacked. Like all of us will probably be attacked. But my proud heart for my city is we have not wavered. Our city government, our city attorneys, our city council. Last year, I was able to report that the city of Evanston had dispersed around $2 million in direct benefits for reparations in Evanston, and today it's just under $6 million that has been dispersed in direct benefits for the harms of people impacted by the legacies of slavery in Evanston. In addition to that, our interfaith community, who was able to go to the interfaith session earlier? Our interfaith community is showing up, a model ally. Our interfaith community has raised exceeding $1 million. $1 million. They didn't have to do it. They're not legislators. They did it because it was righteous, it was justice. And that commitment continues. It's important to note that that giving goes directly to a Black-led organization, the Reparations Stakeholder Authority of Evanston, that forever will be Black-led. They are trusting Black leaders to do the work to repair ourselves without any interruption or direction. That's what reparations is. Led by Vanessa Johnson McCoy. I always get them confused, sorry. But our federal champion is an ancestor now. But we cannot forget what the Congresswoman told us often. She told us that we work in tandem with the federal legislation. With the same passion and excellence that she demonstrated, let's not lose sight of our North Star, which is federal redress. And so I know it looks bleak, and there are certain political, legislative, judicial barriers ahead of us. But we will win. We can win this together. Ashe. While synchronizing our local efforts, we will achieve federal redress, and we'll hear more about that. Yes, given our current political conditions, strategy and innovation is more necessary than ever before. But our allies and institutions will need to stand up and continue to support us and not retreat. Our allies and our institutions are now more important than ever before. Little by little, a little becomes a lot. And I know y'all are probably tired of hearing me saying that, but it's an African proverb that this means so much to me. Little by little, a little becomes a lot. It's an African proverb that I hold close when thinking about the totality of harm and the process of repair ahead of us. Cumulative impact. The judge always reminds us. 5 years ago, there was one city that had the nerve to say yes. Yes, we will expose ourselves in the name of justice. Yes, we will explore our past. We will imagine a just future for residents, and we will make tangible redress for the policy and practice that was harmful. That was 5 years ago. And what great satisfaction we have today as we commemorate that milestone of 5 years ago with each of you, now a robust resource movement. Let us make the most of each moment we have here together during this symposium. Let us learn and share, as Dr. Daniels always reminds us, and take away what is useful, activate it in your community, and let's win together. Thank you all for being here. I love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love y'all. Don't do that. I love y'all. I've been crying out. Oh. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful. I am so grateful. Next, I want to introduce my colleague, mentor, board member, mutual board members. I'm on the board of Reparations United as well. Again, a man that needs no introduction here in this space, Brother Kamm Howard, if you could come on up. Brother Kamm Howard, long-serving movement leader, international thought leader, practitioner, will give us the state of the national movement for reparations. Thank you, Kamm.
Give it up one more time for Robin and the First Repair team and their exceptional work. They set me up every year to come out to Robin. You know who can come out to Robin. Greetings, everyone. Thank you and welcome to what will be a beautifully inspiring symposium filled with knowledge and skill-building sessions, as well as opportunities for forward-leaning engagement. Last year, I was also asked to offer some opening statements. I started by saying, and I'll say it again today, how inspired I am every time I walk into a space of reparations activists and allies. And I'm certain that being here today with you all, my inspiration will be deepened and my confidence in our victory will be stronger. Last year, I wanted to impress an understanding that as local activists and allies, you also had an obligation and duty to engage in federal efforts toward redress. I shared that according to the data we had, that the Democrats could not win the election without a commitment to repair to a justice. It would be what was needed to inspire enough blacks to come out in the numbers needed for a Democratic Party victory. I stated that we had the power as a nation of 6 million voters to move the Democratic Party in that direction, and that the success of challenging that power depended on us in the reparations movement. These conditions, I stated, defined, necessitated, and mandated our duty and obligation to fight in both local and federal reparations arenas. But that was last year. There's no looking backwards, except, as Dr. Daniels reminded us, for lessons and inspiration and assurances of our current duty. I started the organization Reparations United because I believe down to the very core of my being that without a critical mass acting with a unified sense of purpose and a shared willingness to work together to fulfill that purpose, we will not and cannot win. In 1831, there was a small but very major rebellion against enslavement. It had less than 75 revolters. It was led by a brother who received messages from the divine spirit. He was told how to act and when to act as a result of these messages. Each message magnified his sense of duty and his commitment to fulfill it. And he did, in fact, fulfill his duty. His name was Nat Turner. The Nat Turner Revolt, one that took no mercy on any person benefiting from the enslavement system or who stood in opposition to the justice and humanity of the enslaved. Nat's revolt shook shockwaves throughout the entire nation. How many of us can remember how this nation reacted after the 9/11 terrorist attacks? That incident changed so much in our very lives today, almost 25 years removed. Multiply the nation's reactions to 9/11 by 1,000, and you'll get a sense of the fear and the effect the Turner Revolt had on America at that time. Historians write that Nat's revolt laid the foundation for the Civil War that would be fought some 30 years later. But what does Nat Turner's story have to do with unity in the reparations movement today? Well, we were held in enslavement for almost 250 years, some say closer to 300 years, mostly because of the weaponry of the enslaver and their unparalleled cruelty and inhumanity, but also because of the disunity and fragmentation that existed among our ancestors. Today, disunity and fragmentation exist keenly in the reparations movement. Under those conditions of internal chaos back then how do we make it out of enslavement? History says it was a civil war that Nat's efforts drove this nation toward, where war and aggression between the two dominant factions of the ruling elite was the catalyst to drive a critical mass of our ancestors to wage a unified struggle for freedom. Led by Martin Delany, the father of black nationalism, and Frederick Douglass, the leading integrationist agitator, the two men, as friends and fellow editors of the North Star newspaper, persuaded President Lincoln to allow black men to join the Army and to give them weapons. They admonished the president that he couldn't win the war without us, and that we wanted to fight for our own freedom. Remember, we told Biden the same thing last year. He couldn't win without us, and he had to take it to heart. Of the free and formerly enslaved men, the number was 200,000 that joined the Union Army, with 40,000 black women and 20,000 black children in support. That 260,000 liberated 4 million of our ancestors. Today, many are afraid of what's ahead in the Trump administration. Can this election be our Nat Turner moment, our Frederick Douglass moment, our Martin Delany moment? Can the results of this election inspire us, motivate us, command us to build a unified, critical mass of reparations enforcers? Can we utilize this climate to compel this nation to act, even when it seems most determined to deny, diminish, and retard our current thrust to have our humanity honored? That's what Nat Turner did. That's what Frederick Douglass did and Martin Delany did. That's what Harriet Tubman did and Sojourner Truth. When things seem to be at its worst, inspired by a sense of duty and obligation, being brilliant and fearless enough to take advantage of a divided nation, they united in purpose and commitment and a willingness to act together independent of philosophies. Today, we're saying, with all of the contention in the movement, all the different philosophies that are warring against each other, we're saying it doesn't matter if one is a nationalist or an integrationist or an assimilationist. Doesn't matter if they're ADOS, if they're freedmen, if they're indigenous black Americans, foundational black Americans, abolitionists, socialists, Marxists, leftists, or militants. None of it matters. What matters is whether or not you have a full sense, or whether we have a full sense of our duty at this critical moment in our history in this country. Have we claimed our duty? Will we honor our duty? Can we step up to this ancestral duty that is calling us to act right now? Can each of us be counted as one of the committed to move forward in principled struggle and operational unity, even with those who share fundamental differences with us? These are the questions that matters most to us at this moment. These are the questions that matters for victory. While here in Evanston, I want all of us to engage in this process, understanding the magnitude of the duty at this critical time of our history. It's just as serious as many of our people in America as it was for Nat Turner and Frederick, as it was for Sojourner and Harriet and Martin Delany, and thousands of others who sensed their duty and acted upon it to liberate our ancestors. We are called in this moment to act in a similar manner. It's crucial for the reparations movement and for what's ahead in the Trump-led America. That is my opening statement for this position, or for this symposium, or should I say my opening questions. Will there be unity amongst us, or will we perish? Will the reparations movement perish? Asante Sana, Eluda Continua, Pamoja Tashinde, and Billy Shaka. Many thanks. The struggle continues. Together, we will be victorious. Have a great symposium, everyone.
Thank you, Brother Kamm. Powerful as always. And as Dr. Daniels mentioned, we have the incredible honor to have CARICOM participate in our symposiums. I couldn't believe it the first year when Dr. Daniels said that CARICOM would be represented at our first symposium and have continued. And one thing that I have learned over the last few years of this work is the global Black movement for repair. That we are not in isolation, that we are fighting all across the diaspora, and we can learn from our colleagues and brothers in other nations. And so I want to introduce Attorney Arley Gill. He is a practicing attorney at law. He is presently the chairman of the Grenada National Reparations Committee and a member of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Attorney Gill is an international advocate for reparatory justice and has addressed audiences globally. He is a former government minister in Grenada and a former ambassador. Attorney Gill, thank you for being here with us.
Warm and fraternal greetings from the island of Grenada and the Caribbean. You know, when you see an island boy wearing all this clothes, dressing like this, it's not that we simply follow the finest of British traditions. It may just simply mean that we're feeling cold. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for inviting the CARICOM Reparations Commission, which I'm a member of, and the Grenada National Reparations Committee. The global movement for reparations have never been better. Indeed, the global movement for reparations have never been stronger. And I say that fully being aware of the mammoth task that we have ahead of us. I say that fully being appreciative that the work have only just started. But I say to you, comrades, that as we aspire, nothing close to what should be justly ours has come to us. But it is safe to say that we have made strides. We are moving forward, and that we are breaking down barriers and opening doors. What we have seen over the last couple of years in the Caribbean is that families of British families of slave owners coming forward to apologize and to offer acts of reparations. The Trevelyan family in Grenada, the Gladstone family from Guyana, and the Malcolm family in Jamaica, they have been trailblazers coming forward. And I say to you that in 2013, when the CARICOM heads of government established or initiated the CARICOM Reparations Commission, it was established with the backdrop that the CRC was supposed to be advisors to Caribbean governments in negotiations with former governments, like Britain, Spain, Holland, and so on. We were never conceptualizing that families and institutions would come forward and join in this reparation movement. So the first thing we have witnessed is that families have come forward. Secondly, we have appreciated that institutions have started coming forward. Institutions like universities of Glasgow, other universities in the UK, and I'm following it, universities in the United States are coming forward. I heard tonight that there's one with money and is prepared to share some more money. Also, institutions like the Church of England, the Anglican Church. Now, what we do appreciate is that they have made strides. And let us be absolutely clear that the Church of England, for instance, making £100 million available to do acts, charitable acts, we do not necessarily consider it as reparations. First of all, the first thing they must do is to have a conversation with us. Have a conversation with those of us who represent the victims of the harm which was caused. Secondly, they cannot of their own volition be judge, jury, and executioner to decide whether they are guilty or not of the crimes that they have committed and to take upon themselves to pass sentence on themselves. So we fully understand that. But in the same breath, we appreciate that something is moving inside of them that is shaking their conscience. And as we continue to struggle, we know that this institution will cause trigger-like movements throughout the European world. And we are grateful for that. We have witnessed in 2019 the former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte apologizing. We have witnessed the King of Holland making an apology. Here again, while at the same time we are not satisfied, that the words of these apologies should be formulated after consultation with us. And after the words of apology, concrete measures of reparatory justice should be put in place. But at the same time, we are saying 5, 10 years, 15 years ago, who would have expected a head of the European government to have come forward and to apologize? So that is why we are saying that we are making strides. In recent times, the Commonwealth Heads of Government, we call it SHOGAM, and for persons within the U.S. that do not follow the politics or follow the perspectives outside of the U.S., the Commonwealth Heads, the Commonwealth Organization, is really and truly an organization of member states of former British colonies, Caribbean countries, African countries, and so on. And it's the very first time in the history of the Commonwealth nations that is headed by the British government, led by the patronage of the King of England. For the very first time this year, about a month ago, they have acknowledged that reparations, that it is time to have a discussion on reparations. Very first time. And I can say to you that that inspired an emergency meeting within the CRC. Because not too long ago, for instance, in about the month of July, we in Grenada wrote to the Bank of England. Grenada is the only former colony that the Bank of England actually owned slaves and owned plantations. Now, they have funded and offered mortgages throughout the former British countries for investors to invest in plantations, in the slave trade, and the owning of slaves. But they never owned directly slaves and plantations. And in Grenada, in the 1770s, from 1777 to 1781 or thereabouts, because of failed payments, they inherited or they owned 3 plantations and no less than 500 slaves. We wrote them in the last days of the conservative government in England. And they responded to us, repeating the words of the former Prime Minister, that reparations, they're not considering that. We are now in the process of responding to the letter in the early days of the British Labour government. And while we appreciate that Prime Minister Starmer and Foreign Secretary, who have Guyanese roots, are saying that despite the fact that reparations for the very first time has made its way in a communique from the Commonwealth heads of government, that cash and monies are not going to be paid out to former British colonies. I say to the comrades and to my colleagues in the CRC that what we are witnessing is that even the British government and its leaders are running scared. What they are thinking is probably that we in the Caribbean will sail up to England and load up containers of cash and sail back down to the Caribbean. And that brings me to the next point, therefore, with regards to where we are. And I see Dr. Daniels, who is far more qualified than any one of us, will speak on the revision of the 10-point plan. Dr. Daniels did the very first lecture in a series of lectures that we've had at the Grenada National Reparations Commission. And he has visited Grenada at every landmark moment, including this year's independence. And he's always in Grenada to celebrate the Grenada Revolution. The revision of a 10-point plan is extremely important for us in this reparative movement. And I tell you why. It now becomes extremely important. Our messaging and our communication is extremely important. Because the persons that we need to speak to, the institutions that we need to speak to, the governments that we need to speak to, our message needs to be clear. Because when we speak of reparations, to many persons, they believe that we're coming to put money in our individual pockets. In the Caribbean, we see reparations and the 10-point CARICOM plan as a national developmental program to develop our communities that have been depraved, that have been deprived, that for centuries have been experienced the exploitation of resources and the repatriation of wealth. Because when we speak about the British Commonwealth, we say all the time, we have the wealth and they're the commoners. So that the revision of the CARICOM 10-point plan is extremely important in this juncture as we revisit the message that we need to send forward. But not just only the Commonwealth of Nations. For the last 3 years or so, each and every CARICOM head of state have addressed the issue of reparations at the United Nations General Assembly. When I leave here, I journeyed to Barcelona. It is the very first time as well that UNESCO, a United Nations organization, reparations is on the agenda. Very first time. So that, as I said, the work has only now got started, but we have achieved quite a bit in the last 3-4 years. And I'm seeing that here in the US. In Barbados next week, the United Nations Permanent Forum is having a consultation on the Convention for Human Rights for African descendants. The UN, that organization is led by a St. Lucian comrade, Dr. June Suma. That again is a first for us. And as we continue to struggle and campaign and lobby for another 10 years, within the United Nations to focus on peoples of African descent. We believe that now we are knocking at the doors of the United Nations and its agencies to recognize that the subject of reparations is the most important global subject at this juncture. Climate justice is another limb of the reparative struggle, because we appreciate that slavery, slave trade, the genocide of the indigenous peoples is what funded the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution is what is the commencement of the destruction of the climate. So that as we move forward, the issue again, and that is why the revision of the 10-point CARICOM plan, at some point in time, we need to make the logical connection between climate justice and reparative justice. They are not dissimilar. Within the CRC, within the CARICOM region, we have established firm links with the African Union. The issue of reparations is led by President Addo and Ghana in the African Union, and within CARICOM it is led by Barbados and Prime Minister Mia Mottley, two very powerful world leaders. But that joining in of arms is not just for the Caribbean region and the African region. And that is why I was moved very much so by the last speaker. We also need now to connect in a more strong and purposeful way the struggles of the Caribbean region for reparations with that of you here in the United States, with that of our comrades in the United Kingdom. Within the CRC, we have brought in the Dutch Caribbean, we have brought in the French Caribbean. Haiti, of course, is very much a part of us, and we must now need to connect the dots around the diaspora and share our experiences and lock arms. What we say must be the same. Our messaging must be extremely important. So I envisage that the next stage of the struggle, one with the revision of the 10-point CARICOM plan, must be accompanied with stronger linkages, stronger connections between all of the struggles within the diaspora with regards to reparations. And I believe this particular forum is an excellent starting point for us here to ensure that at the end of this symposium that we establish permanent linkages between what happens between the states in the US, what happens within the United States space, must also give life to what happened back in the Caribbean, what happened on the mainland of Africa, and what happened with our comrades who continue to fight for reparations on the European mainland. So sisters and brothers, comrades, thank you very much for having us, and I look forward to a very fruitful symposium. Thank you so much.
Something different that we did this year was we were learning a lot in the field, in the practice of reparations, that our solutions are right here in our community of practice. Our experts are right here among us. And so we opened up the RFP process so that we could hear what sessions you wanted to present, because I've learned so much. And so we're excited to have a few TED-style talks that will be presented next. And our first is, did you enjoy your sessions? Because the sessions were a result of movement partners and practitioners that actually had a vision for what they wanted to share with the movement. And so first we're going to have Mr. Eric Sutton of Soul, Soil, and Sea, a push toward climate justice reparations. Thank you, Eric, for being here.
First, I want to say I wasn't supposed to go after Attorney Gill, but he set me up great. I'm excited to be here. Yes, he really did. And also I want to say I'm really honored to be here. I've been going through a lot of health struggles, and the spirit that y'all brought in this room has made me feel really good about where I'm going personally, so I'm very grateful. And lastly, I want to say thank you to the team, First Repair. I live right down the street. I walked up. I let them know what I do. I love that the RFP process existed, and I can't wait to share with y'all a little bit more about why I believe climate repair, climate reparations needs to be central to our reparations struggle. Firstly, I know that we can trace unprecedented emissions right now to the Industrial Revolution, and we all know that those origins, as Attorney Gill said, lie in the transatlantic slavery. But I'm going to talk specifically about just one story in the U.S., and I can't get to every story because I only have 7 minutes, but this is one that I hope that y'all are able to connect to and better understand why reparations, in our general sense, needs to center climate reparations as well. So one, the U.S. empire continues to intensify the climate crisis at a local level. I'm from Indianapolis, central in the Rust Belt. I grew up close to one of the largest municipal parks, and also at the same time in one of the most polluted zip codes in the city. Those two things shouldn't exist side by side, yet they do, and that is an intentional piece of work by the U.S. empire. I'm gonna take us through how, one, mass enslavement and state violence funded the United States Industrial Revolution, talk about how unprecedented greenhouse gas emissions are central to that space, and lastly, talk about what we risk culturally, spiritually, environmentally, and financially by not engaging in these practices. Let's see if the clicker works. There we go. All right, so I'm going to take us through one, how U.S. enslavement and industrialization set the stage for unprecedented greenhouse gas emissions, talk about the need to address past and continued harms, and then think about why we need to pursue these. Let's see next. There we go. So y'all can look at that. I'm going to talk to you. One, I just want to remind us that, yes, climate disaster certainly affects every person, every living organism, but it doesn't affect us all equally, and it never has. We, as black folks in America, share unique history with other black folks in the Americas, where there's been a history of well-maintenance, anti-black violence that continues in many forms. And because this country has built its wealth and stability through enslavement that has fueled the American Industrial Revolution and war enterprises, we owe modern global capitalism and globalization and we can trace those origins to the breaths of folks on plantations where black folks were forced to labor. Enslavement in this country was wrongfully committed, it's an aberration, and so are all the things that followed: Jim Crow, unequal public infrastructures, and because of these uniquely violent acts, we have intentional, uneven development in this country. The slave economy of the South had ripple effects throughout the entire U.S. economy, with plenty of merchants and banks in the U.S. North benefiting from that. Items transported to New York City, to Boston, elsewhere, helped to organize the trade of agricultural commodities, things like cotton and indigo, that made their way north, and banks built fortunes off of that work. They've enjoyed their riches on the backs of much enslavement. And in the decades in between the American Revolution and the Civil War, enslavement was a source for Rhode Island's mills, a source for wealth that filled New York's banks, a source for markets that inspired Massachusetts manufacturers, as noted by Beckert and Rockman. And cotton offered a reason for entrepreneurs and investors throughout New England and the Northeast, in places like Lowell, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket and Patterson, to connect their riches elsewhere. Many of those struggles that black folks had throughout the country led to the pockets of folks in the Northeast getting much richer, and then they forced that work elsewhere. We owe that to our siblings in places like India, in places like Indonesia, where some of our exports reached them, and they began to be laborers as well. Because of this deeply reaching industry, because of this great need to transport, because of this marketing, there's always been, as Hakeem Jeffrey says, a violent relationship between capitalism and globalization, between capitalism and racism, between capitalism and enslavement, and we can't untie those histories and we can't untie those realities. Click it this way. Oh, okay. Thank you. And because of these entrenched violent industries that built their backs off of enslavement, the U.S. was set up for unprecedented environmental impact and unprecedented industrial growth. Climate disaster economies in the U.S. profit from racist colonial violence and operate fully knowing that environmental degradation is a must to continue profit. And because of this truth, we see stratified impacts where folks who are contributing the least to rising global emissions are experiencing the most extreme impacts. Think about where you see many times huge climate impacts, and who are the folks you see on TV, and who are the folks who are calling your phones? It's often the same places where mass enslavement took place, in the US Gulf, in the US South. And I want us to think too about where some of the largest industrial polluters live, in places like Louisiana, in places like South Texas, in places like Columbus, Georgia. Some of the most toxic waste alleys, poorly sited and permanent lands lie in the Gulf, in the mid-Atlantic on former slaveholding states. And in these states, in these places where air quality is the lowest, most often we see they're predominantly black. Most often we see they're rural. Most often we see not only is there not natural disaster preparation and preparedness, but there's already infrastructure that is ready to burst. There's already pipelines made of methane and carbon that are ready to burst, that are improperly sited. There's necessary chemical facilities in these areas that are ready at any strike of the moment, at any poorly sited space, to fall. And simply put, the U.S. industry's priorities have disallowed adequate emergency preparedness for people living in these areas, but also have intentionally been placed in these places as sacrifice zones. And today we have ideas like carbon removal where DAC hubs are being placed in places like Louisiana again, and we have folks actively talking in Louisiana and communities in Louisiana saying, we don't want to be sacrifice zones for you anymore. We don't want to be places for experimentation anymore. We don't want to be places for you to try out your new material. This way. And so I wanted to bring us to this place of thinking about this from many places: air, soil, water, and more. Today in so many marginalized communities, especially places like Lake Charles, Louisiana, and the US Gulf, we have compounded unsafety, where there's drinking water that's unsafe. Manufacturing plants, an environmental integrity report notes 84% of these plants are violating their air permits with unsafe levels of pollution. We have permits that are being permitted too rapidly and methane pipelines where they should not be. In our air, in our soil, in our water, these pollutants are finding our ways into our bodies. According to Beyond Petrochemicals, roughly 15% of the US's carbon budget goes to petrochemicals. So where can we look for solutions? Again, I want to thank Attorney Gill for setting me up, because there's so many global strategies that our siblings elsewhere are practicing as we're practicing in the US. But someone I want to draw attention to recently is the African Union Summit, the African Climate Summit, and COP28, and the Three Basin Summit that included Indonesia, the Congo, and the Brazil, where they didn't ask for reparations, they demanded reparations. Each time, in unison. They called out France, they called out the US, they called out the Dutch, and they named what they needed. They said, we don't just need you to name that these things happened. We don't just need truth commissions. What we need is loss and damages funds. What we need is a space for you, all who in the global north have led to this pollution, led to this overburdening, to make space for ways of us getting the funding we need to clean up your act, in addition to them cleaning up their own. They said climate disaster economies continue to profit from disproportionate impacts, but also we know because of this truth that where we're seeing the rise in global emissions, we're also seeing the rise in increased environmental impacts. And so what are the potential pathways? This is where I sort of leave it to y'all to think about what are the ways that we can use this story of enslavement to industrialization to incredibly unprecedented emissions, where right now we have 6.5 million metric tons of carbon in our air. What can we do? I'm proposing a three-pronged attack, but I know there's many people here who are well-versed than me to figure this out in a better way. But I want to suggest three things. One is adherence to international reparations law, thinking about the 5 pillars with an emphasis on loss and damages funds. Secondly, federal acknowledgement and dictation of environmental harms that tighten NEPA restrictions. And lastly, local truth commissions. I think this time that the US follows suit and speaks truth to power. I want to leave you with one quote by Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who urges us that in order to address our climate emergency, we must rapidly, radically reshape society. We need every solution and every solver. And as the saying goes, to change everything, we need everyone. What this moment calls for is a mosaic of voices, the full spectrum of ideas on how we can turn things around. Thank you.